Welcome to Exasperated Nerd Explains. Kathleen Kennedy gave an interview to Rolling Stone that has led to a lot of strong reactions. She said the following about making Star Wars movies, and I quote, "Every one of these movies is a particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material, we don't have comic books, we don't have 800-page novels, we don't have anything other than the passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be." Wait, no source material? None? Nothing? No thoughts come to mind? There is an entire expanded universe of stories that came out for years. And I know you know, because they are still for sale, but now rebranded as Star Wars Legends. You know another word for legends? Lies. That's all they are now, for-profit fanfiction. All these characters and adventures officially no longer exist. And I get not wanting to be bound by years of continuity dictating what you can and can't do. I really do. And don't tell me you can't pull in the elements you like from these novels and comic books because you've already recanonized things. Grand Admiral Thrawn is back. And sure, he was kidnapped by space whales, which was an odd turn, but you still brought him back into continuity. There are lots of characters, places, and events that you could bring in and retrofit to the story. I think this is also a dig at Marvel Comics and their universal acclaim. But guess what? Even though the origins are pretty well set, they also, take things they want from the source material and mix it around so it works in their universe. Kind of like you could do. Iron Man was injured in Vietnam, then he was turned into a teenager, so that's why he's still young today. Because comics are weird. And guess what? You too have plenty of weird and also great Star Wars stories you could pull from, but you choose not to. I think the reason people are reacting to this quote is because it feels like an excuse. She could have said, "Oh, I'm making movies in one of the most beloved, examined, and criticized franchises in the world. It's tough to balance fan expectations while trying to pull in new viewers and not be held back creatively by other Star Wars stories that have already been told." And if she had said that, no one would be reacting to this interview because that's true. Moving on. Freddie Prinze Jr. talked about Star Wars, and actually this was a while ago. I saw it then, but it has started circulating online again for some reason, so I thought I'd address some of the things he said. A lot of people said he's taking it to the Star Wars trolls, but I'm not aware of any trolls in Star Wars.
I'm so sorry.
He says he's an expert, but it's in the he's not a doctor, but he's played one on TV kind of way. He also says he had these conversations with Dave Filoni and George Lucas. Filoni, from all accounts, seems to know his stuff, but at the same time, he's not George Lucas, so you cannot say they match up on everything 100%.
Let's talk about the seduction of Anakin Skywalker for a second. If the Emperor is the smartest dude in the universe and knows that the Force dictates this, if he kills who he sees as a rival, Anakin, then he knows the Force is just going to correct that. So the Emperor knows that. So instead of killing Anakin, what does he do? He seduces Anakin to double the strength of the dark side. So then what does the Force do?
Balance.
It balances us. How? It gives us twins, Luke and Leia. 2 and 2. Balance.
In general, I agree, since they talk about the balance of the Force in different ways throughout the films and shows. But Filoni sold this through an arc in the Clone Wars, and if Fred is such a good friend and expert, he should know that. This raises a lot of questions, even if it is from the mouth of George Lucas. At the beginning of Episode 1, as Ki Adimundi of France says,
"The Sith have been extinct for a millennium."
While it's clear that they weren't extinct, they have been hiding out as master and subsequent apprentice, 2 at a time for 1,000 years, so I guess balance wasn't a big deal for that entire period, but it is so important that it immediately led to the twin birth of Luke and Leia to counteract Anakin having just turned to the dark side. So, in summation, the living will of the Force can dictate births of Force users to change the balance, but is unable to predict the free will of these people? So it doesn't really know if it's changing the balance at all and could be making it worse. Or does it know their destiny? If it knew, then it also knew Anakin would turn to the dark side, but if it knew that, it knew everything he would do. But if it knew that, how come it wasn't creating more dark side users the whole time? So does Anakin have free will, or is it all destiny, including the child slaughter? It is a lot more balanced after he's done. Darth Vader turns out to be the absolute worst of goth phase, but it's hard to argue with the living will's results. In another part of his epic rant, he says,
Because Luke Skywalker's Cinderella. Or Sleeping Beauty,
Yeah.
okay? He can talk to things that don't speak English and understands what they're saying. He gets a fairy godfather instead of a fairy godmother who teaches him how to be the best Jedi in the world in no time flat. Like it's archetype characters. This is George Lucas's words. There is no Jack Bauer in Star Wars. That character doesn't exist.
He kind of contradicts himself since he says there's no Jack Bauer in Star Wars, but then also says Luke is the best Jedi ever immediately. He's also got his archetypal characters mixed up, as Luke on the hero's journey is a different archetype from the fairy tale princess character. His criticism here is an obvious rebuttal to the claim that Rey is a Mary Sue, or Jack Bauer, who can do anything. Let's look at the footage! Luke, wielding a lightsaber for the first time, is shot by a training droid repeatedly, just beginning to understand the Force, deflecting blaster fire at the end of this session. This shows he can tap into the Force and is learning, but he's not instantly blocking everything. The first time we see Luke fight someone else with a lightsaber is in Empire Strikes Back. Keep in mind, and this is important, is canon that the time between the release of the movies in the original trilogy is the time that has passed in universe. So this is 3 years after meeting Obi-Wan and beginning his Jedi training. He has now also trained with Yoda, though for exactly how long is unclear. Guess what? He loses his hand and the fight, and he is fighting someone who isn't even trying to kill him, but trying to recruit him. Also in Empire Strikes Back, Luke struggles to pull the lightsaber out of the snow to save himself from the Wampa. So even after 3 years, he is by no means a master of the Force and still struggles at some of the basics. Rey, meanwhile, fights Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. This is after 2-3 days, depending on travel time, after learning about the Force. To start, she pulls the lightsaber to her using the Force out of Kylo Ren's Force pull, already showing greater abilities in 3 days than Luke has after 3 years. Then she bests Kylo Ren in single combat with no training. He was injured, but with all his training from Luke and Snoke, he still should have won. Oh yeah, and she can do the Jedi mind trick already, and also read minds at this point. That all sounds a little Jack Bauer to me. That's just the Force, so let's look at piloting. Luke blows up the Death Star, right? He just joined the Rebels, that's pretty fantastical. But they do establish that.
But it's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than T-meters.
Look at that. They established this character has basically trained his whole life for this moment through the murder of small animals like some sort of proto-serial killer. When Rey flies the Millennium Falcon for the first time and beats First Order pilots who have been groomed since birth like Finn, she says,
Thanks. How did you do that? I don't know. I've flown some ships, but I've never left the planet. You're lost. That was
not even an attempt to establish why she can do this. No, it's like I could see what they were going to do.
He can see things before they happen. That's why he appears to have such quick reflexes.
That's why people rightfully say Rey is a Mary Sue, or Jack Bauer, if you will. Fred is right about one thing. Luke and many others in the original trilogy are archetypal characters. But I don't see George Lucas's name under the screenwriting credits for the new trilogy. Disney just tossed out his sequel ideas. Fred is acting like they have a plan, but they don't. They gave Rian Johnson complete creative control, and he destroyed any plot threads from The Force Awakens. Originally, at the end of Episode 7, Luke was going to be surrounded by floating rocks from his Force powers, but they changed this after they realized where Episode 8 was going. Even before this, J.J. Abrams is not Lucas. He's not adhering to these archetypes, clearly. Maybe if they followed the archetypes, people wouldn't have a huge problem with these movies. Yes, there are trolls who love nothing more than to rip apart fandom and criticize, but there are legitimate criticisms of these movies in comparison with the others, and to pretend otherwise is just absurd. Pointing out there is power creep, making the new characters supercharged, and that they are making bad decisions does not mean that I'm being toxic. Star Wars is a guy everyone knows and likes, but Disney and Kathleen Kennedy took him out into the back alley and just beat the crap out of him. Help! Help! He's bleeding! Send an ambulance! And then the ambulance comes and just runs him right over because it's being driven by Rian Johnson with a stupid name tag so you say his name right. Your name is Ryan, you can't even get a first name right and you expect to make a good Star Wars movie? Why would you go in with no plan? That's the tough nut to crack. Alright, that's all. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you so desire. Check out my other videos. Bye.